The alarm clock buzzed at 6:30 a.m., just like every other Tuesday morning. Lisa rolled over and hit the snooze button, but her golden retriever, Buddy, was already wide awake. He sat by the bedroom door, tail wagging, knowing exactly what time it was. This was their routine. Every single day for the past 3 years, they walked the same path along the old railway bridge. Lisa worked at the animal clinic downtown, and these morning walks were the best part of her day. It gave her time to think before dealing with sick pets and worried owners. The fresh air helped clear her mind, and Buddy loved exploring new smells along the trail. She grabbed her coffee mug and looked out the window. October in Colorado meant chilly mornings, so she put on her favorite hoodie and grabbed Buddy's leash. He was already spinning in circles by the front door, making those happy whining sounds dogs make when they know something good is about to happen. The old railway bridge was about 10 minutes from her apartment. Most people in the neighborhood avoided it because it looked run down and forgotten. The city had closed it to trains about 15 years ago, and now it was just this massive concrete structure that nobody really cared about anymore. But Lisa loved it here. It was quiet, peaceful, and she rarely ran into other people. As they walked along the gravel path leading to the bridge, Buddy trotted ahead like he always did. He knew this route by heart. First, he would sniff the big oak tree where other dogs had left their marks. Then he would check out the rusty fence post where squirrels liked to hide. Every morning, same routine. But today felt different somehow. The fog was thicker than usual, making everything look gray and mysterious. Lisa could barely see 20 feet ahead of her. The morning was eerily quiet, too. No birds singing, no traffic sounds from the distant highway. Just the sound of their footsteps on the gravel and Buddy's panting. They reached the bridge, and Lisa started her usual routine of checking her phone while Buddy did his business. She scrolled through social media, reading about her friends' weekend plans and looking at pictures of breakfast. Normal stuff, boring stuff. The kind of stuff that makes you feel like every day is exactly the same. Then Buddy did something weird. Instead of following their usual path across the bridge, he suddenly stopped dead in his tracks. His ears perked up, and he turned his head toward the concrete supports underneath the bridge. Lisa had never seen him act like this before. "Come on, boy," she called, tugging gently on his leash. "Let's keep going," but Buddy wouldn't budge. He planted his feet firmly on the ground and started making this low, worried whining sound. It wasn't his normal excited whine. This was different. This was the sound he made at the vet's office when he sensed something was wrong. Lisa looked in the direction Buddy was staring, but all she could see was fog and shadows under the bridge. The concrete supports disappeared into the mist, creating dark spaces that looked like caves. She had walked past this spot hundreds of times and never paid attention to what was down there. "What is it, Buddy?" she asked, crouching down next to him. "What do you smell?" Buddy looked up at her with those big brown eyes that seemed to say, "You need to pay attention to this." Then he did something he had never done before. He pulled hard on the leash, trying to drag her toward the steep slope that led down under the bridge. Lisa felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold morning air. Dogs have incredible senses. They can smell things humans can't even imagine. They can hear sounds that are completely silent to us. And they have this amazing ability to sense when something is wrong. She stood there for a moment, torn between her daily routine and Buddy's obvious distress. Part of her wanted to ignore it and keep walking. She had to get to work soon, and she didn't want to be late. But Buddy was insistent. He kept pulling toward the embankment, whining louder now. Okay, she said finally, "but just for a minute." The slope down to the bridge supports was steep and covered with loose rocks and dead leaves. Lisa had to hold on to tree branches to keep from slipping as she followed Buddy down. Her sneakers weren't made for hiking, and she almost fell twice. The fog was even thicker down here, and the concrete walls of the bridge blocked out most of the morning light. Buddy was getting more agitated by the second. His tail was rigid, and he was making these sharp, urgent barks that echoed off the concrete. Lisa had never seen him like this. He was usually the most laid-back dog in the world, as They got closer to the bridge supports. Lisa started to smell something strange. It wasn't a bad smell exactly, but it was definitely human, like unwashed clothes and old food. Her first thought was that some homeless person was sleeping under here, which wouldn't be that unusual. The bridge provided good shelter from rain and wind. But then she heard something that made her heart skip a beat, a weak, raspy voice saying, "Help." It was so quiet, she almost thought she had imagined it. But Buddy heard it too. He was pulling harder now, leading her around the massive concrete pillar toward the darkest part of the bridge's underside. That's when she saw them. 3 men were huddled together against the concrete wall, wrapped in what looked like old blankets or tarps. They were so still that for a horrible moment Lisa thought they might be dead. But then one of them moved slightly, turning his head toward the sound of Buddy's barking. Lisa's hands started shaking as she pulled out her phone to turn on the flashlight. In the pale LED glow, she could see that these weren't just any homeless men. They were wearing military uniforms, camouflage fatigues that looked official, not like something you'd buy at a surplus store. The man who had called for help tried to sit up straighter, but he was clearly weak. His face was gaunt, his lips cracked, and his eyes had that hollow look of someone who hadn't eaten in days. The other 2 men were in even worse shape, barely conscious. "Please," the man whispered, his voice barely audible. "We've been here so long." Lisa's mind was racing. What were military soldiers doing under this bridge? Why did they look like they were starving? How long had they been here? And most importantly, why hadn't anyone found them before now? She fumbled with her phone, trying to dial 911 with trembling fingers. Buddy sat down next to the men, as if he understood that his job was done. He had found what he was looking for. Now, it was up to the humans to figure out what to do next. As the phone rang, Lisa looked at these 3 men who looked like they had been forgotten by the world. Whatever had happened to them, whatever had brought them to this desperate situation. Under an abandoned bridge, she knew that Buddy had just saved their lives, the 911 operator answered, and Lisa tried to explain what she had found. But how do you explain finding 3 military soldiers apparently dying under a bridge in the middle of Colorado? It sounded crazy even to her. All she knew was that her normal, boring Tuesday morning had just become the most important day of her life. The 911 operator's voice was calm and professional, but Lisa could barely focus on the questions being asked. Her heart was pounding so loud she could hear it in her ears. She kept looking at the 3 men slumped against the concrete wall, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. "Ma'am, can you tell me your exact location?" the operator asked. "I'm under the old railway bridge on Maple Creek Road," Lisa said, her voice shaking. "There are 3 men here, and they look really sick. They're wearing military uniforms." "Are they conscious?" Lisa crouched down closer to the men. The one who had asked for help was looking at her with desperate eyes. He was young, maybe in his 20s, with short, dark hair and several days' worth of stubble. His uniform had a name tag that read Johnson, and there were patches on his sleeves that she didn't recognize. "One of them is awake," she told the operator. "The other 2 are breathing, but they're not really responding." Buddy was sitting quietly now, but he kept looking between Lisa and the men like he was worried. Dogs are amazing at reading situations, and Buddy clearly understood that something serious was happening. The conscious soldier tried to speak again. "Water," he whispered. "Please." Lisa always carried a water bottle on their walks. She pulled it from her backpack and carefully helped the man take small sips. He drank like someone who hadn't had water in days, which scared her even more. "The ambulance is on the way," the operator said. "Can you stay on the line with me?" "Yes, I'll stay," Lisa replied, though part of her wanted to run. This whole situation felt surreal, like she had stumbled into someone else's nightmare. She looked more closely at the 3 men while waiting for help to arrive. They were all wearing identical camouflage uniforms that looked official and well-made. These weren't cheap knockoffs from a costume store. The fabric was heavy-duty, designed for serious military use. But the uniforms were dirty, torn in places, and smelled like they hadn't been washed in weeks. The man she had given water to was trying to sit up straighter. "Thank you," he said, his voice a little stronger now. I didn't think anyone would find us. How long have you been here? Lisa asked gently. He thought for a moment, like he was having trouble remembering. I think maybe 2 weeks. The days kind of blur together. 2 weeks. Lisa felt sick to her stomach. These men had been suffering under this bridge for 2 weeks, just a few hundred yards from where she walked every single day. How had no one noticed them before? What happened to you? She asked. Are you hurt? The soldier's eyes filled with something that looked like confusion and anger. We were supposed to be picked up, he said. This was just supposed to be a training exercise, a few days, they said. But no one came back for us. Lisa didn't understand what he meant, but she could hear sirens in the distance now. Help was coming. She felt a wave of relief wash over her. The second soldier started to stir, opening his eyes slowly. He was older than the first one, maybe in his 30s, with graying hair at his temples. When he saw Lisa, he looked confused and scared. Who are you? He asked weakly. My name is Lisa. I found you guys. The ambulance is almost here. The older soldier looked at his companion. Rodriguez, is this real? So the first soldier's name was Rodriguez. Lisa filed that information away. Rodriguez nodded at his friend. It's real, Thompson. We're getting help? Thompson started crying. Not loud? Sobbing, just quiet tears rolling down his cheeks. I thought we were going to die here, he said. Lisa felt her own eyes welling up. She couldn't imagine what these men had been through. They looked like they had given up hope completely. The third soldier was still unconscious, but his breathing seemed steady. He was the youngest of the three, probably barely out of his teens. His face was sunken and pale, and Lisa could see that he had lost a dangerous amount of weight. The sirens were getting louder now, and Lisa could see flashing red and blue lights through the fog. She waved her arms to help the paramedics find them under the bridge. Down here, she shouted. We're down here. Within minutes, the quiet space under the bridge was filled with activity. Paramedics rushed down the slope with their equipment, followed by 2 police officers and a fire department. Captain, everyone was asking questions at once. How long have they been here? Do you know these men? Are there any weapons present? What's your relationship to the victims? Lisa tried to answer as best she could, but she didn't know much. She explained about her morning walk, about Buddy's strange behavior, and about finding the 3 soldiers. The paramedics immediately began checking vital signs and starting IVs. One of the paramedics, a woman with kind eyes and graying hair, looked concerned as she examined the men. These guys are severely dehydrated and malnourished, she said to her partner. We need to get them to the hospital immediately. The police officers were taking notes and photos, treating the scene like a potential crime scene. One of them, a tall man with a serious expression, approached Lisa. Ma'am, I need to ask you some questions. Did you touch anything besides giving them water? No, I just found them and called 911, Lisa said. But officer, they said something strange. They said they were supposed to be picked up from a training exercise. They've been here for 2 weeks. The officer's expression changed. He looked more interested now. They said it was a military training exercise? Rodriguez, who was now on a stretcher being prepared for transport, heard the conversation. Please, he said to the officer. We need to contact our base. They think we completed the mission and returned, but we've been stuck here the whole time. The officer pulled out his radio and stepped away to make some calls. Lisa could hear him saying words like military personnel and possible abandoned training exercise. As the paramedics carried the stretchers up the slope toward the ambulances, Lisa stood there feeling overwhelmed. In the span of 30 minutes, her normal morning walk had turned into a rescue operation involving multiple emergency services. Buddy walked over and sat next to her, looking up with those understanding brown eyes. She scratched behind his ears. Good boy, she whispered. You saved them. One of the paramedics approached her before leaving. You probably saved their lives, she said. Another day or two, and this could have been a very different situation. As the ambulances drove away with sirens blaring, Lisa realized that this was just the beginning. These men had a story to tell, and something told her it wasn't going to be a simple one. Military personnel don't just get abandoned during training exercises. Someone, somewhere, had made a terrible mistake or done something much worse. She looked back at the concrete space where the 3 soldiers had been suffering in silence for 2 weeks. Tomorrow, she would find a different route for their morning walk. Lisa couldn't stop thinking about the 3 soldiers as she drove to Denver General Hospital later that afternoon. She had called in sick to work, which she never did, but there was no way she could focus on giving shots to puppies and cleaning kennels after what happened that morning. Her boss understood completely when she explained the situation. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and coffee, just like every hospital she had ever been in. Lisa wasn't sure if she would even be allowed to see the men, but she felt like she needed to know they were okay. Buddy had to stay in the car, but she cracked the windows and promised to be quick dot at the information desk. A tired-looking woman with reading glasses looked up from her computer. "I'm looking for 3 patients. Who were brought in this morning," Lisa said. "They were found under the railway bridge." The woman's expression softened. "Oh, you must be the one who found them. The nurses have been talking about you all day. Let me call up to their floor." A few minutes later, Lisa was riding the elevator to the 4th floor, following a nurse named Patricia who seemed excited to meet her. "Those poor men have been asking about you," Patricia said. "They want to thank you properly." The hallway was quiet, with that strange hospital atmosphere where everything feels urgent and calm at the same time. Patricia led her to a room with 3 beds. All 3 soldiers were awake now, looking much better than they had that morning. They had been cleaned up, were wearing hospital gowns, and had 4 tubes running into their arms. Rodriguez, the one who had been most conscious under the bridge, smiled when he saw her. "There she is," he said, "our guardian angel." Lisa felt embarrassed by the attention. "I didn't really do anything. My dog is the one who found you." Thompson, the older soldier, was sitting up in bed eating what looked like chicken soup. That dog of yours has better instincts than most people," he said. "We owe him our lives." The youngest soldier, who Lisa learned was named Williams, looked much healthier now that he was hydrated and had some food in him. "The doctor said we were maybe 2 days away from serious organ damage," he said quietly. "If you hadn't found us when you did, double quote." Lisa pulled up a chair between their beds. "What I don't understand is how you ended up there in the first place. You said something about a training exercise?" The 3 men looked at each other, and Lisa could see some kind of silent communication happening between them. Rodriguez spoke first. "We're stationed at Fort Carson, about 2 hours south of here," he said. "2 weeks ago, our commanding officer called us into his office for a special assignment." Thompson took over the story. "Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell told us we were being selected for an advanced survival training exercise. He said it was classified, and that only the best soldiers were chosen for this kind of mission." Williams nodded. "We were supposed to be dropped at a remote location and survive for 48 hours using minimal supplies. Then a recovery team would pick us up and evaluate our performance." Lisa was starting to get a bad feeling about where this story was going. "But that's not what happened." "Not even close," Rodriguez said, his voice getting angry. "They dropped us off at that bridge at night. We had basic rations for 3 days, a tarp, some water, and our standard gear. The instructions were to stay hidden and wait for extraction. The 48 hours came and went," Thompson continued. "Then 3 days, then a week. We tried to hike back to base, but the maps they gave us were wrong. We kept ending up in circles, getting more lost each time." Williams was playing with the hospital bracelet on his wrist. "Our radio equipment wasn't working either. We thought maybe it was the terrain, but now we're starting to think it was sabotaged." Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. "You think someone deliberately left you there?" "We don't know what to think," Rodriguez said. "All we know is that we followed orders, and those orders nearly got us killed." Just then, a doctor walked into the room. She was a woman in her 50s with gray hair pulled back in a ponytail and the kind of confident manner that comes from years of dealing with medical emergencies. "I'm Dr. Martinez," she said, shaking Lisa's hand. I understand you're the one who found our patients here. How are they doing? Lisa asked. Dr. Martinez looked at the three men with a mixture of concern and anger. They're lucky to be alive. Severe dehydration, malnutrition, early stages of hypothermia. Another few days and we would have been looking at kidney failure, possibly worse. She pulled Lisa aside and lowered her voice. In 20 years of emergency medicine, I've never seen anything like this. These aren't homeless veterans or people who fell through the cracks of society. These are active duty military personnel who were apparently abandoned during what was supposed to be a routine training exercise. Lisa looked back at the three men who were talking quietly among themselves. What happens now? Well, we've contacted their base, Dr. Martinez said. And that's where things get interesting. According to Fort Carson's records, these three soldiers completed their training exercise successfully and returned to base 12 days ago. Lisa felt her mouth drop open. But that's impossible. They've been under that bridge the whole time. Exactly, Dr. Martinez said. Someone has been filing false reports, claiming these men returned when they clearly didn't. The question is, why? A new voice interrupted their conversation. That's what we're here to find out. Lisa turned to see two people in military uniforms walking into the room. The woman was tall with short blonde hair and the kind of posture that screamed military training. The man was older, with graying temples and serious eyes. I'm Captain Davis from Criminal Investigation Division, the woman said. This is Sergeant First Class Brooks. We need to speak with these soldiers immediately. Rodriguez sat up straighter in his bed when he saw the investigators. Ma'am, we've been trying to contact our command for 2 weeks. Where have you been? Captain. Davis pulled out a notebook. That's what we're trying to figure out, soldier. According to your unit's records, you three completed Exercise Iron Wolf on October 8th and returned to base for debriefing. Your commanding officer filed a successful completion report. That's a lie, Thompson said, his voice getting louder. We never returned to base. We'd been dying under that bridge while he was filing fake reports. Williams was getting agitated. 2. Sir, with all due respect, someone needs to explain why we were left to die. This wasn't a training accident. Someone knew exactly where we were and chose not to help us. Sergeant Brooks was taking notes while Captain Davis asked questions. Lisa could tell this was becoming a much bigger deal than anyone had initially thought. Ma'am, Rodriguez said to Captain Davis, we need you to understand something. Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell didn't just abandon us by accident. The maps he gave us were deliberately wrong. Our equipment was sabotaged. This was intentional. Captain Davis and Sergeant Brooks exchanged a look that told Lisa they were taking this very seriously. We'll be conducting a full investigation, Captain Davis said. But first, we need detailed statements from each of you about exactly what happened. As the investigators began their formal questioning, Lisa realized she had stumbled into something much bigger than a simple rescue story. These three men hadn't just been forgotten or lost due to bureaucratic incompetence. Someone had deliberately put them in that situation and then lied about it. The question was why, and Lisa had a feeling the answer was going to be more disturbing than anyone was prepared for. Captain Davis set up a small recording device on the hospital table between the three beds. The room felt tense as she prepared to take their official statements. Lisa started to leave, thinking this was private military business, but Rodriguez stopped her. Please stay, he said. You saved our lives. You deserve to know what really happened to us. Captain Davis nodded her approval. Actually, your presence might help them feel more comfortable sharing details. Sometimes civilians can ask questions we might not think of. Lisa settled back into her chair as Thompson began telling their story from the beginning. His voice was steady, but she could see his hands shaking slightly as he remembered those terrible 2 weeks. It started on a Monday morning, Thompson said. Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell called the three of us into his office around 0800 hours. He told us we had been specially selected for something called Exercise Iron Wolf. Williams picked up the story. He made it sound like a big honor. Said we were chosen because of our survival skills and psychological profiles. The exercise was supposed to test our ability to survive in urban environments with minimal resources. Rodriguez was nodding along. Mitchell explained that we would be dropped at a location within 50 miles of base. We'd have basic supplies for 72 hours, and our job was to remain undetected while waiting for extraction. Simple stuff, really. We'd done similar exercises before. Captain Davis was taking notes. What supplies were you given? 3 MREs each, 2 canteens of water, a tarp, basic first aid kit, and our standard field gear, Thompson replied. Plus maps of the area and a radio for emergency contact. And the maps looked official, Williams added. Professional military cartography? We had no reason to doubt them. Rodriguez's voice got harder as he continued. Mitchell drove us out to the bridge location himself. It was around 2,200 hours, completely dark. He said the night drop was part of the challenge. Lisa leaned forward. Did anything seem strange about his behavior that night? The 3 soldiers looked at each other. Rodriguez spoke first. Now that I think about it, yeah. He seemed nervous. Kept checking his watch and looking around like he was worried about something. He also took our personal cell phones, Thompson said. Claimed it was standard protocol for the exercise, but we'd never had to surrender our phones before. Williams was staring at the ceiling, remembering. And he spent a long time explaining the radio procedures. Said we should only use the emergency frequency if we were in immediate life-threatening danger. Looking back, it feels like he was trying to discourage us from calling for help. Captain Davis made more notes. What happened after he left you? At the bridge? The first night was fine, Rodriguez said. We set up our shelter under the bridge, established a watch schedule, and settled in. The location actually made sense for urban survival training. Good cover, water source nearby, multiple escape routes. Thompson continued the timeline. Day 2 was when we started to get concerned. The extraction was supposed to happen within 48 hours, but nobody showed up. We tried the radio, but all we got was static. By day 3, we knew something was wrong, Williams said. We decided to hike back to base using the maps Mitchell had given us. This was where the story got really disturbing. Rodriguez pulled out a piece of paper from his bedside table. The hospital staff saved this. It's one of the maps we were given. Captain Davis examined the map carefully. Even Lisa could see that something looked off about it. The roads didn't seem to connect properly, and some of the landmarks looked like they were in the wrong places. We followed this map for 2 days, Rodriguez said bitterly. It led us in complete circles. Roads that we're supposed to connect to. Highways just ended in the middle of nowhere. Landmarks that should have been there didn't exist. Thompson was getting emotional now. We'd walk for 8 hours, thinking we were making progress toward base, only to end up right back where we started. It was like being trapped in a maze. Williams took over. By day 6, we were running out of food and water. We found a small creek near the bridge where we could refill our canteens, but we had to ration everything else. Did you try to flag down passing cars or seek help from civilians? Captain Davis asked. Mitchell specifically told us that contact with civilians would result in automatic failure of the exercise. Rodriguez explained. He said we were being watched and evaluated the entire time. We thought breaking cover would end our military careers. Lisa felt sick listening to this. So you suffered in silence because you thought it was part of the test? Exactly, Thompson said. We kept thinking the extraction team would show up any minute. That this was all part of some elaborate psychological evaluation. Williams was quiet for a moment before speaking. Around day 10, we started to accept that we might die out there. We were weak, starving, and losing hope, but we still believed we were following orders. What finally made you realize something was seriously wrong? Sergeant Brooks asked. Rodriguez looked at his 2 friends. It was when Williams collapsed on day 12. He was barely conscious, and we realized our radio had never worked properly, not even once. That's when we understood this wasn't a training exercise anymore. The radio was completely dead, Thompson confirmed. No static, no power, nothing. Like the batteries had been removed or the circuits fried. Captain Davis was writing furiously. Did you examine the radio more closely? As best we could with no tools, Williams said. It looked like someone had deliberately damaged the internal components. Very carefully so it wouldn't be obvious from the outside. Lisa couldn't stay quiet anymore. This is insane. Someone sent you out there to die. Why would anyone do that? Rodriguez shrugged. That's what we keep asking ourselves. We were good soldiers. No disciplinary problems, good performance reviews. We can't think of any reason why Mitchell would want to hurt us. Unless it wasn't personal, Thompson said thoughtfully. Maybe we were just convenient test subjects for something. Captain Davis looked up from her notes. What do you mean by that? I mean, what if this wasn't about us specifically? What if Mitchell needed 3 soldiers to disappear for some reason, and we just happened to be available? The room went quiet as everyone considered this possibility. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. The idea that these men were randomly selected to be abandoned was, somehow, even more terrifying than thinking they had been targeted for personal reasons. Williams was the first to speak again. There's something else we need to tell you. On our last day under the bridge, when we were barely conscious, we heard vehicles nearby. Multiple trucks, sounded like military convoys. Rodriguez nodded. We tried to call out, but we were too weak. The vehicles stopped for maybe 10 minutes, then drove away. You think they were looking for you? Sergeant Brooks asked. Maybe, Thompson said. Or maybe they were making sure we were still there. Still suffering. Captain Davis closed her notebook and turned off the recording device. Gentlemen, what you've described isn't a training accident or bureaucratic mistake. This sounds like attempted murder. The word hung in the air like a physical presence. Murder. Someone had deliberately tried to kill 3 innocent soldiers by abandoning them in the wilderness with faulty equipment and false information. Lisa looked at Rodriguez. Thompson and Williams, seeing them differently now? They weren't just survivors of a terrible ordeal. They were victims of what seemed to be a carefully planned crime. And somewhere out there, Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell was going about his daily routine, probably thinking he had gotten away with it, but he hadn't counted on a curious golden retriever. Named Buddy? Or the woman who trusted her dog's instincts enough to investigate strange behavior on a foggy Tuesday morning. Lisa went home that evening with her head spinning. She couldn't stop thinking about what she had learned at the hospital. 3 men had almost died because someone in the military had deliberately abandoned them. It felt like something out of a movie, not real life. She was sitting on her couch with Buddy curled up next to her when she decided to do something that would change everything. She pulled out her phone and opened Facebook. Her hands were shaking as she started typing. You. Guys, something incredible happened today. My dog Buddy found 3 soldiers under the old railway bridge who had been abandoned there for 2 weeks. They were almost dead from starvation and dehydration. I can't share all the details yet, but this story needs to be heard. These heroes were left to die, and someone needs to be held accountable. She added a photo of Buddy looking proud and heroic and hit post. Within minutes, her phone was buzzing with comments and shares. Her friends couldn't believe what they were reading. Oh my God. Lisa, are you serious? This is unbelievable. Is this really happening? Those poor men. Thank God for Buddy. But it wasn't just her friends who were seeing the post. Facebook's algorithm picked it up and started showing it to more and more people. By the time Lisa went to bed, the post had been shared over 100 times. She woke up the next morning to her phone ringing nonstop. The first call was from a reporter at Channel 7 News. Miss Chun, this is Monica Rivera from Channel 7. We'd like to interview you about the soldiers you found yesterday. Can you come to the station this morning? Before Lisa could answer, another call was coming in, then another. Local newspapers, radio stations, even some national news outlets had somehow gotten her number. The story was spreading faster than she had ever imagined. At the same time, something else was happening that Lisa didn't know about yet. At Fort Carson, Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell was having the worst morning of his life. Mitchell was in his office drinking coffee and reviewing training schedules when his assistant knocked on the door. Sir, Colonel Henderson wants to see you immediately. He said it's urgent. Mitchell felt his stomach drop. Colonel Henderson was the base commander, and urgent meetings usually meant bad news. He walked to the commander's office, trying to look calm, but his hands were sweating. "Mitchell, sit down," Colonel Henderson said without looking up from his computer. "I just got off the phone with some very angry people in Washington. Want to explain to me why 3 of our soldiers were found dying under a bridge yesterday?" Mitchell's mind raced. This couldn't be happening. According to his paperwork, Rodriguez, Thompson, and Williams had completed their exercise and returned to base 12 days ago. He had filed all the proper reports. "Sir, I'm not sure what you're referring." "T.O.," Mitchell said carefully. "All personnel from Exercise Iron Wolf returned safely and were debriefed according to protocol." Colonel Henderson turned his computer screen around so Mitchell could see it. It was Lisa's Facebook post, which now had thousands of shares and hundreds of comments. "Then explain this," Henderson said coldly. "Because according to this woman and about 50 news outlets that have called me this morning, 3 of our Marines were abandoned during a training exercise that you were in charge of." Mitchell felt the blood drain from his face. "Sir, there must be some mistake. I have documentation showing that all participants in Exercise Iron Wolf." "Cut the crap, Mitchell," Henderson interrupted. "I already called the Criminal Investigation Division. They're interviewing the 3 soldiers right now, and from what I'm hearing, your documentation is complete fiction." Mitchell's career was flashing before his eyes. 20 years in the military. And it was all about to end because of one stupid decision. "Sir, if I could explain the circumstances, the only circumstance I'm interested in is why 3 soldiers nearly died while you were filing false reports claiming they had returned safely," Henderson said. "Pack up your office. You're suspended. Pending investigation, effective immediately." While Mitchell was being escorted from the base, Lisa was dealing with her own chaos. Her phone hadn't stopped ringing all morning, and there were news vans parked outside her apartment building. She finally agreed to do one interview with Channel 7, thinking it would help get the soldier's story out there. She met the reporter, Monica Rivera, at the hospital. "This is an incredible story," Monica said as her cameraman set up. "Can you walk us through exactly what happened when you found these men?" Lisa told the story again, focusing on Buddy's strange behavior and the shocking condition of the 3 soldiers. But as soon as the interview aired that afternoon, her phone started ringing with calls from people who identified themselves as military officials. The first call was from someone claiming to be a public affairs officer from Fort Carson. "Ms. Chun, we appreciate your concern for our personnel, but we need you to understand that this involves classified training operations. Any further media interviews could compromise ongoing military activities." Lisa was confused. "But these men were abandoned. Someone tried to kill them." "That's not accurate," the voice said firmly. "There was a miscommunication during a routine exercise. The situation has been resolved, and we ask that you refrain from speaking to the media about classified operations." The second call was even more direct. A man who said he was from the Department of Defense told her that she could face legal consequences for sharing information about classified military exercises. "Ma'am, what you stumbled into involves national security matters," he said. "We strongly advise you to remove your social media posts and decline any further media requests." But it was too late. Lisa's story had already gone viral. Hashtag Buddy the Hero was trending on Twitter. News outlets across the country were picking up the story. The video of her interview had been viewed over 1 million times. That evening, Lisa got a call that surprised her. It was Rodriguez, calling from the hospital. "Lisa, we need to warn you about something," he said quietly. "Some military officials came by the hospital today. They weren't the good guys like Captain Davis. These guys were trying to get us to change our story." "What do you mean?" Lisa asked. "They wanted us to say that the whole thing was a misunderstanding, that we got lost during a training exercise and were too embarrassed to call for help. They offered us all promotions and transfers to better bases." "If we'd agreed to their version of events," Lisa felt angry. "They're trying to cover it up." "Exactly," Rodriguez said. "But here's the thing. Because you posted about it online and talked to the news, they can't make this story disappear. Too many people know about it now. Thompson's voice came on the line. He was sharing the phone. Lisa, they're scared, really scared. Which means, what happened to us is bigger than just one bad officer making a poor decision. Williams added his voice to the conversation. They told us that speaking to the media about classified operations could result in court-martial proceedings against U.S. But we don't care anymore. People need to know the truth. Lisa realized that her simple Facebook post had created a situation that powerful people were desperately trying to control. But the story was already out there, spreading faster than they could contain it. The next morning brought even more surprising news. Other soldiers started coming forward with similar stories. A Marine from Camp Pendleton called Channel 7 saying he had been abandoned during a training exercise 6 months earlier but was too afraid to report it. A soldier from Fort Bragg shared a story about a survival exercise where the maps were wrong. And the radio didn't work. What Lisa had uncovered wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern that had been going on for months, maybe years. And now that the story was public, more and more victims were finding the courage to speak up. By the end of the week, the Department of Defense announced they were launching a comprehensive investigation into training procedures across all military bases. Congressional representatives were calling for hearings. The story that started with a dog's unusual behavior on a morning walk had become a national scandal, but Lisa knew that powerful people don't give up easily when their careers and reputations are at stake. The cover-up attempt had failed, but she had a feeling the real fight was just beginning. 2 weeks after the rescue, Lisa found herself sitting in a conference room at the Federal Building in downtown Denver. She never imagined that walking her dog would lead to meetings with military investigators, but here she was, surrounded by people in serious suits asking detailed questions about everything she remembered. Captain Davis was there, along with several other military officials Lisa didn't recognize. There was also a woman from the Inspector General's office and a man who introduced himself as being from Congressional Oversight. The whole thing felt surreal. "Miss Chun, we want to thank you again for coming forward with this information," said the woman from the Inspector General's office. "Your willingness to speak publicly has encouraged other victims to come forward, which is helping us understand the full scope of this problem." Lisa shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "I just did what anyone would do. I couldn't leave those men to die." "Actually, that's not true," Captain Davis said gently. "Most people would have assumed it was none of their business or been too intimidated by the military to speak up. You chose to fight for the truth." The man from Congressional Oversight opened a thick folder. "What we've discovered since your story broke is deeply disturbing. Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell wasn't acting alone, and this wasn't his first time abandoning soldiers during training exercises." Lisa felt her stomach turn. "There were others?" "At least 6 other incidents over the past 18 months, Captain Davis confirmed, all involving survival training exercises that went wrong. Soldiers left without proper supplies, given faulty equipment, abandoned for extended periods." The woman from the Inspector General's office pulled out photographs. "These are some of the other victims who have come forward since your story became public." Lisa looked at the photos. Young men and women in military uniforms, all looking healthy and proud. It was hard to imagine them suffering the same fate as Rodriguez, Thompson, and Williams. "What happened to them?" Lisa asked quietly. "Various things," Captain Davis replied. "Some were eventually rescued by civilian hunters or hikers. Others managed to find their way back to base after days of wandering. 2 soldiers were hospitalized with severe hypothermia and dehydration. One young woman nearly died from infected wounds she got trying to build shelter." The Congressional Oversight official leaned forward. "The pattern we're seeing is deliberate and systematic. Mitchell would select soldiers for these special training exercises, always choosing people who were new to the base or didn't have strong social connections with other personnel. So, if they disappeared, fewer people would notice or ask questions," Lisa said, understanding the terrible logic. "Exactly," the woman from the Inspector General's office confirmed. He also chose soldiers who were known for following orders without question, people who would suffer in silence rather than break what they thought were exercise rules. Lisa remembered Rodriguez telling her how they were afraid to seek help from civilians because they thought it would end their careers. This is sick. Why would anyone do this to their own soldiers? Captain Davis pulled out another folder. That's what we're still trying to figure out. We've been investigating Mitchell's background, his finances, his personal relationships, everything. What we found is a pattern of corner cutting and cost reduction that goes back years, the congressional official explained. Mitchell was under enormous pressure from his superiors to reduce training costs while maintaining readiness standards. The woman from the Inspector General's office nodded. Military budgets have been tight, and commanders have been pushed to do more with less money. Some officers have responded by finding creative ways to cut expenses. Lisa was confused. But how does abandoning soldiers save money? Think about it, Captain Davis said. A proper survival training exercise requires multiple vehicles, support personnel, radio operators, medical teams on standby, and coordination with local authorities. All of that costs money and requires paperwork. Mitchell's version was much cheaper, the congressional official continued. Drop 3 soldiers off at night, file fake completion reports, and pretend the exercise happened according to regulations. On paper, it looked like he was running efficient, cost-effective training programs. Lisa felt sick. So he was willing to let people die to make his budget numbers look good? It appears that way, the woman from the Inspector General's office said sadly. We've also discovered that Mitchell was being considered for promotion based partly on his ability to manage training costs effectively. The room was quiet for a moment as everyone absorbed the full horror of what they were discussing. Lisa thought about Rodriguez, Thompson, and Williams lying under that bridge, slowly dying while their commanding officer was probably getting praised for his efficient budget management. There's something else, Captain Davis said, pulling out more documents. We found evidence that Mitchell wasn't the only officer doing this. We're investigating similar incidents at bases in North Carolina, Texas, and California. Lisa's eyes widened. This was happening all over the country? It looks that way, the congressional official confirmed. The pressure to cut training costs was coming from the Pentagon level. Some commanders found legal ways to reduce expenses, but others started cutting corners in dangerous ways. The woman from the Inspector General's office leaned back in her chair. What's particularly disturbing is that Mitchell had a system for covering his tracks. He would wait until soldiers were reported missing or found by civilians, then claim they had gotten lost during authorized leave time rather than during official training. That way, the military couldn't be held responsible for their injuries. Or deaths, Captain Davis added. It would just look like soldiers making poor personal decisions during their free time. Lisa remembered the phone calls she had received trying to silence her. The people who called me after my interview, trying to get me to stop talking to the media. Were they part of this cover-up? The 3 investigators exchanged looks. We're still investigating that, the congressional official said carefully. But it's clear that some people in the military hierarchy knew more about these incidents than they initially admitted. Captain Davis opened her laptop and showed Lisa a spreadsheet. This is what we've compiled so far. 15 soldiers across 4 different bases, all subjected to similar abandoned training exercises over the past 2 years. Lisa looked at the names and dates, feeling overwhelmed by the scope of what had been happening. 15 people could have died because someone wanted to save money on training. Some of them nearly did die, the woman from the Inspector General's office said quietly. You saved 3 lives by finding Rodriguez, Thompson, and Williams when you did. But you also saved future lives by speaking out publicly. How do you mean? Lisa asked. Because your story went viral, we started getting calls from soldiers and their families reporting suspicious training incidents, Captain Davis explained. Without that public attention, we might never have discovered the full pattern. The congressional official closed his folder. Miss Chun, I want you to understand something. What you did took real courage. The military can be an intimidating institution, and many people would have been scared off by the phone calls and pressure you received. Lisa shook her head. I just couldn't stay quiet when I knew those men were telling the truth. They almost died because someone chose money over human lives. That's exactly why we need people like you, the woman from the Inspector General's office said. Whistleblowers and concerned citizens who are willing to speak up when they see something wrong. As the meeting ended, Lisa realized that her part in this story was far from over. Mitchell would eventually face court-martial proceedings, and she would likely be called to testify. Other officers might be charged as well. The investigation was going to take months, maybe years, but for the first time since finding those 3 men under the bridge, Lisa felt like justice might actually be possible. The truth was coming out, and people in power were being held accountable for their actions. Walking back to her car, she thought about Buddy waiting at home. Her dog had no idea that his curious nose had uncovered a conspiracy that went all the way to the Pentagon. All he knew was that he had smelled something wrong and trusted his human to investigate. Sometimes the most important discoveries happen when we pay attention to the things that don't seem right, even when it would be easier to just keep walking. 6 months after that foggy October morning, Lisa found herself walking through the gates of Fort Carson for the first time in her life. She was wearing her best dress and carrying a folder full of documents, but she still felt out of place among all the military personnel rushing around in their crisp uniforms. Today was the day of Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell's court-martial hearing, and Lisa was scheduled to testify as a key witness. She had been dreading this moment for weeks, not because she was afraid to tell the truth, but because she knew she would have to relive that horrible morning when she found 3 men dying under the bridge. Captain Davis met her at the entrance to the courthouse building. "How are you feeling?" she asked with genuine concern. "Nervous," Lisa admitted. "I've never testified in a military court before. I don't really know what to expect." "Just tell the truth, exactly like you did during our interviews," Captain Davis said reassuringly. "The prosecutor will ask you about finding the soldiers, and Mitchell's defense attorney might try to suggest that this was all just a training accident. But stick to the facts of what you saw and heard." As they walked through the courthouse, Lisa could see that this case had attracted a lot of attention. There were reporters sitting in the gallery, military officials taking notes, and family members of other victims who had come to support the prosecution. The courtroom itself was smaller than Lisa had expected, but very formal. Mitchell sat at the defense table wearing his dress uniform, though he had been stripped of his rank insignia. He looked older than Lisa remembered from the photos she had seen, and his face was pale and drawn. At the prosecution table sat Rodriguez, Thompson, and Williams in their dress uniforms. They had all recovered completely from their physical ordeal, but Lisa could see the emotional toll it had taken on them. They gave her encouraging smiles as she took her seat in the witness area. The military judge, Colonel Anderson, called the court to order. "This court-martial will address charges against former Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell, including negligent endangerment, dereliction of duty, conduct unbecoming an officer, and falsifying official reports." The prosecutor, Major Patterson, stood to give his opening statement. "Your Honor, the evidence will show that the defendant deliberately abandoned 3 Marines during what was supposed to be a routine training exercise. He provided them with faulty equipment, incorrect maps, and no means of communication, then filed false reports claiming they had returned safely to base." Lisa listened as Major Patterson laid out the case in clear, simple terms. Mitchell had been under pressure to reduce training costs and had chosen to fake exercises rather than conduct them properly. When soldiers were abandoned and went missing, he covered it up by claiming they had completed their training successfully. Mitchell's defense attorney, a civilian lawyer named Mr. Harrison, argued that his client had made honest mistakes during a stressful period of budget cuts and increased operational demands. "Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell is a decorated officer with 20 years of faithful service," he said. "What happened was a tragic miscommunication, not a deliberate attempt to harm anyone." When Lisa was called to the witness stand, her heart was pounding. She had practiced her testimony dozens of times, but actually sitting there under oath felt Completely different. Major Patterson started with simple questions about her background and her daily routine. Then he asked her to describe the morning she found the three soldiers. My dog Buddy was acting strange, Lisa began, her voice steady despite her nerves. He kept pulling toward the bridge supports, whining in a way I had never heard before. When I followed him down the slope, I found three men in military uniforms who were barely conscious. She described their condition in detail: the dehydration, the weight loss, the desperation in their voices when they begged for help. The courtroom was completely silent as she spoke. Did the soldiers say anything to you about how they ended up in that situation? Major Patterson asked. Yes, Lisa replied. They told me they had been abandoned during a training exercise. They said they had been waiting for pickup for almost 2 weeks, and no one had come for them. Mr. Harrison, the defense attorney, tried to suggest during cross-examination that Lisa might have misunderstood what the soldiers told her, or that they might have been confused due to their medical condition. Ma'am, isn't it possible that these men were simply lost and didn't want to admit they had made navigation errors? He asked. Lisa looked directly at Mitchell as she answered, No, sir. These men were not lost. They were abandoned. And they almost died because someone chose not to fulfill their duty to bring them home safely. The most powerful testimony came from Rodriguez, Thompson, and Williams themselves. Each man took the stand and described in detail what they had endured during those 2 weeks under the bridge. Rodriguez spoke about the false maps that led them in circles when they tried to hike back to base. Your Honor, we followed those maps exactly as instructed. They were deliberately designed to keep us lost. Thompson testified about the broken radio equipment. Sir, when we examined the radio more closely, we could see that components had been removed or damaged. This wasn't equipment failure, this was sabotage. Williams, the youngest of the three, broke down while describing the final days when they thought they were going to die. We kept believing that someone would come for us, he said through tears. We trusted our commanding officer and he left us to die. But the most damning evidence came from other soldiers who had experienced similar abandoned training exercises. One by one, they testified about being given faulty equipment, incorrect maps, and impossible missions. A Marine named Corporal Jackson described being left in the desert of Nevada for 6 days with no water source marked on his map. I only survived because a park ranger found me collapsed near a hiking trail, he said. Another soldier, Sergeant Lopez, testified about being abandoned in the mountains of North Carolina during winter. I lost 3 toes to frostbite, she said, because Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell told us that calling for help would result in immediate discharge from the military. The pattern was clear and undeniable. Mitchell had systematically endangered the lives of at least 15 soldiers over a period of 2 years, all to make his training budgets look good on paper. When the prosecution presented Mitchell's falsified reports showing exercises that never happened and soldiers who were never properly extracted, even his defense attorney seemed to lose confidence. The most shocking moment came when Major Patterson revealed recordings of phone calls Mitchell had made to military public affairs officers after Lisa's story went public. In the recordings, Mitchell could be heard instructing others to pressure Lisa into staying quiet about what she had found. We need to contain this situation before it gets out of hand, Mitchell's voice said clearly through the courtroom speakers. Get her to sign a non-disclosure agreement if necessary. Lisa felt angry listening to those recordings. Even after nearly killing 3 men, Mitchell's first instinct had been to cover up his crimes rather than take responsibility. The trial lasted 3 days, but the verdict came quickly. The military jury found Mitchell guilty on all charges. Colonel Anderson sentenced him to dismissal from service, forfeiture of all pay and benefits, and 4 years in military prison. As the sentence was read, Lisa looked at Rodriguez, Thompson, and Williams. They weren't celebrating, but she could see relief in their faces. Finally, someone had been held accountable for what had happened to them. Outside the courthouse, Major Patterson spoke to the gathered reporters. This case sends a clear message that the military will not tolerate officers who endanger the lives of the men and women under their command for personal gain. But Lisa knew that Mitchell was just the beginning. The investigation had revealed a systemic problem that went far beyond one corrupt officer. Real change would require reforming the entire military training system to prevent future tragedies. As she drove home that evening, Lisa thought about how one morning walk with her dog had led to justice for so many people. Sometimes standing up for what's right requires more courage than you think you have, but the alternative, staying silent while people suffer, is simply unacceptable. 1 year after that life-changing October morning, Lisa stood in her backyard watching Buddy chase butterflies in the afternoon sunshine. It was hard to believe how much their lives had changed since that foggy day when everything seemed so ordinary and predictable. The doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. When she opened the front door, she found Rodriguez, Thompson, and Williams standing on her porch, all dressed in their civilian clothes and carrying a large wrapped package. "Surprise," Rodriguez said with a big grin. "We hope you don't mind." U.S. dropping by unannounced, Lisa hugged each of them tightly. Even though they talked on the phone regularly and met for dinner once a month, seeing them always reminded her of how close they had come to never meeting at all. "We brought you something," Thompson said, gesturing to the package. "It's from all of us, plus some of the other soldiers who came forward after your story broke." Inside the wrapping was a beautiful framed photo of Buddy sitting proudly next to an American flag with an engraved plaque that read, "To Buddy and Lisa, heroes who saved lives and changed everything. With eternal gratitude from the soldiers you rescued and the ones you saved in the future." Lisa felt tears welling up in her eyes. "You guys didn't need to do this." "Yes, we did," Williams said firmly. "You have no idea how many lives you saved by speaking up when you did." They sat on her back porch drinking iced tea while Buddy sprawled across all their feet, clearly happy to have his favorite humans visiting again. The men looked healthy and strong now, nothing like the skeletal figures she had found under the bridge. "How are you all doing? Really doing?" Lisa asked. She knew that physical recovery was only part of their healing process. Rodriguez was the first to answer. "The nightmares have mostly stopped. I still don't like being in small, enclosed spaces, but the counseling has helped a lot." Thompson nodded. "The military provided us with excellent psychological support. It took me a while to trust authority figures again, but I'm back to full duty and actually enjoying my work." Williams, who had been the youngest and most traumatized by the experience, smiled. "I'm doing better than I thought I would. The hardest part was feeling like we had somehow failed as soldiers. The counselors helped us understand that we were victims, not failures." Lisa was relieved to hear this. She had worried about them constantly during the first few months after the rescue, especially after learning about the long-term effects that trauma can have on people. "What about your careers?" she asked. "I was afraid that speaking out might hurt your futures in the military." "Actually, it's been the opposite," Rodriguez said. "The military has been very supportive. They've made it clear that we did the right thing by telling the truth and that soldiers who report problems or abuse will be protected." Thompson pulled out his phone and showed Lisa some photos. "I got promoted to staff sergeant last month. And Rodriguez here just got selected for a special leadership training program." Williams was beaming. "And I'm being transferred to a new base in California where I'll be working with a unit that trains other soldiers in survival skills. Real survival skills with proper safety protocols." Lisa felt proud of all three men. They had survived something terrible and come out stronger, using their experience to help make the military safer for other soldiers. "What about the investigation?" Lisa asked. "I heard that several other officers were charged besides Mitchell." Rodriguez's expression became more serious. 3 other officers at different bases were court-martialed for similar crimes. 2 of them received prison sentences, and 1 was discharged with loss of benefits. "The best part," Thompson added, "is that the military completely overhauled their training safety protocols. No soldier can be sent on any exercise now without multiple safety checks and constant communication requirements." Williams nodded enthusiastically. "They created a new position called Training Safety Officers at every base. Their only job is to make sure exercises are conducted safely and that all personnel are accounted for at all times. Lisa thought about how many future soldiers would be safer because of these changes. It made everything they had been through feel worthwhile. "There's something else we wanted to tell you," Rodriguez said, his voice becoming emotional. "The military is creating a new award for civilians who show exceptional courage in helping military personnel. It's being called the Citizen Hero Medal." Thompson continued the thought. "You're going to be the first person to receive it. The ceremony is next month at the Pentagon." Lisa was speechless. She had never expected or wanted recognition for what she did. "I just did what anyone would do." "No, you didn't," Williams said firmly. "Most people would have been intimidated into silence when the military tried to pressure you. You chose to fight for the truth even when it was scary and difficult." As the afternoon wore on, they shared stories about what had happened in their lives over the past year. Rodriguez had gotten engaged to his longtime girlfriend. Thompson had reconnected with his daughter after years of estrangement. Williams had started college classes and was thinking about becoming a teacher after his military service ended. "You know what's funny?" Rodriguez said, watching Buddy sniff around the garden. "Before this happened, we were just 3 soldiers doing our jobs. We probably would have served our time and gotten out without ever making much of a difference. But now," Thompson continued, "we've become advocates for military reform. We speak at training academies about the importance of ethical leadership. Our story is being used to educate officers about their responsibilities to their soldiers." Williams looked directly at Lisa. "And it all started because you trusted your dog's instincts and had the courage to investigate when something seemed wrong." That evening, after the men had left, Lisa sat on her porch with Buddy curled up next to her. She thought about all the lives that had been changed by one morning walk that went differently than planned. Her own life had changed too. She still worked at the animal clinic, but she had also become involved with organizations that advocate for military families. She spoke at community groups about the importance of civilians supporting service members and speaking up when they see something wrong. Most importantly, she had learned that ordinary people can make extraordinary differences when they choose. Courage over comfort. The next week, Lisa received a letter that made her cry. It was from a young Marine she had never met, stationed at a base in Japan. "Dear Miss Chun," the letter read, "you don't know me, but I wanted to thank you for saving my life. I was scheduled to participate in a training exercise similar to the one that nearly killed Rodriguez, Thompson, and Williams. Because of the reforms that resulted from your speaking out, that exercise was canceled and redesigned with proper safety measures. I might have been the next soldier found dying under a bridge somewhere. Instead, I'm safely serving my country and looking forward to coming home to my family. Thank you for being brave enough to speak the truth." Lisa folded the letter carefully and put it in the drawer where she kept all the thank you notes she had received from soldiers and their families over the past year. That weekend, she and Buddy took their regular morning walk, but they chose a new route through the downtown park instead of the old railway bridge. The bridge held too many painful memories for everyone involved. As they walked, Lisa reflected on how much can change when we pay attention to the things that don't seem right and have the courage to act on what we discover. Sometimes the most important thing we can do is simply refuse to walk away when someone needs help. Buddy trotted ahead on his leash, nose to the ground, alert to all the interesting smells and sounds around them. Lisa smiled, knowing that if her dog ever acted strangely again during one of their walks, she would definitely pay attention. After all, you never know when an ordinary morning might become the beginning of something extraordinary.